You're listening to episode 25 of A Whole New You podcast. On today's show, Lori interviews Hayley Ryczek from Health Starts in the Kitchen. They talk about all of the benefits of fasting. Welcome to A Whole New You podcast. I'm your co-host, Kim Maravich. I'm a registered nurse and author of the book 360 Health. I'm joined by my dear friend, Lori Biddle, a health and wellness coach certified through the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. Our show exists to inspire and empower women to take charge of their health with weekly tips and conversation about self-care, mindset, nutrition, fitness, and clean living. Please keep in mind that the material provided in this podcast is intended as general information only and should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. We're thrilled to have you here. Let's get to the show. Before we get to the episode, I'd like to read a 5-star review that we received through iTunes. This is from Karen Johanknick, and the title is, "Thank you, Kim and Lori." She says, "Thank you for yet another very insightful podcast. Your podcasts are jammed with so much great information for women and men of all ages. And this last one has taken it to a whole new level. I had never heard of T-Tap, and I'm looking forward to giving it a try. The chair one was intense. Thanks for all of your research and efforts to get so much useful information to your listeners. Keep up the great work." So Karen, thank you so much for leaving this awesome review. We really appreciate taking the time to do that. Reviews help to boost our rankings in iTunes, and they help people find our show who might not already know about it. So if you're listening, please go ahead and pause the recording and head over to iTunes so that you can leave us a rating and review, and you can also subscribe to the show while you're there. And if you do leave us a review, we will be sure to read it on one of our future episodes. Now, let's get to the show.
Hi, everyone. I am here today with Hayley Ryczek, and we are going to be talking about fasting, which I have to tell you is a topic that I'm personally not super educated on. I've had a lot of questions about it lately, which is exactly why I'm bringing Hayley on to talk about it. And before we get into all of that, just want to give you a little background on Hayley and I. We went to college together at Clarion University. We were Zeta sorority sisters, and several years ago, and I'll let her say exactly when and talk a little bit about her journey, but several years ago, she went through the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and we were friends on social media, again, because we were college sorority sisters. And I remember sitting at my corporate job and, so far removed from the world that I'm in now and not really understanding like all her posts and what was going on. And then fast forward a few years later, when I decided to go through IIN and, realized that I need to start really paying attention to what I'm feeding my family, what I'm bringing into our home, what we're putting on our bodies, how important this all was. Like I had to open my eyes to all of it. And Hayley really helped me to do that and has been so inspiring through my whole journey. And, she reached out to me as soon as she saw that I was going through IIN and, asked if I needed any help or had any questions. She's been super supportive. And I, again, am so inspired by her. She currently has a blog called Health Starts in the Kitchen, and she's published 2 cookbooks. And her photography on her Instagram and, for her blog is just, oh my gosh, it's amazing. You'll have to make sure that you check it out. She just told me right before we came on, because I was going on and on about her 17,000 Instagram followers and how that blows my mind. But she's got like over 1 million in readership per month on her blog. So again, just like something, we all aspire to do and be when you enter this industry, and we all feel like we're small fries. She just kind of said that to me now, which I'm thinking like, she's got this huge following and she still is so humble and feels kind of the way I do, which kind of cracks me up because my following is like so minimal compared to her. But, we're out there and we're spreading this message, and I'm just so proud of her and so honored to have her here today. And I'm going to let her just talk a little bit more about her background and her journey. And then we're going to dive into, this topic of fasting, which is something she personally does. So she can give us, the inside scoop, as well as all of her, history and knowledge from her studies and her blog. So thank you, Hayley, for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to get to talk to you about fasting and share my journey a little bit. And your words were so kind. Thank you so much. You took all the nervousness right out of me for doing a podcast. I feel so good about myself. Thank you so much.
Oh, great. Well, you should feel good about yourself.
I'm so flattered that really, whenever you start a journey where you're with me with IIN, and that was 8-9 years ago, to know that inspired you to kind of look at things differently, that it's really, really powerful. And, I'm glad that I could help you with that. And that's really, I decided to start my blog 8 years ago because my husband was tired of hearing me. And he's like, you have to find someone else to talk to. Maybe you should start one of those blogs. I'm like, I don't really want to do that. I'll just talk to you. And it was like persistent. And he came up with the name Health Starts in the Kitchen. And, I did IIN just for personal enrichment, like just looking to kind of streamline the things that we were doing at home. I was working in fashion retail buying at the time. And we were, we'd always had a garden, but we were just getting our backyard flock of chickens and really overhauling the foods that we ate to being super high quality. While we always ate real food, we didn't focus so much on quality. And at that time, where we live in very, very rural Pennsylvania, we didn't have access to organics or grass-fed meats. So, we started small and, over the past 8 to 10 years, have completely changed everything in our lives to be very holistic minded, high quality, real food based. And the blog has just been part of that journey, and such my photography. It's kind of like, if you look at the evolution of my pictures, you can see the evolution of my cooking. You can see the evolution of, the way that I present the foods that we eat. I'm really grateful that along the way, I had the opportunity to write 2 cookbooks, which when a publisher reaches out and says, do you want to write a cookbook? Yes. Yes, I do. Thank you.
Right.
Yes. Let's just get that bucket list checked off. But throughout all of this, I've just been on this continuing educational journey where I'm always reading, always looking for ways that we can optimize our health, and really pushing myself to think outside of the parameters of what we think health should be. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how I've adapted our way of eating and, ended up embracing fasting as a part of that as well.
Yeah. So let's just kind of start with the basics as far as like, what is fasting? I think we all know it's not eating, but, just kind of a little bit deeper dive into that and like how it's helpful. And
all right. So let's just start there. I'm going to start with the biggest misconceptions of fasting and an explanation of what it is. So fasting is the voluntary abstinence from eating food. And that can be for spiritual reasons, health reasons, or a multitude of other ideas. Fasting is not starvation, and fasting is not an eating disorder. Okay. Mm-hmm. If you're starving, that means that someone else is withholding food from you, or you do not have access to food. It's not an eating disorder. It's not where your mental, your visual interpretation of the size of your body is skewed. This is something that is, you are consciously making this decision. And, if you think about it from like historically from spirituality, virtually every religion had fasting in it at some point.
Right.
Lent wasn't just for Christian Catholic, Lent is a part of that 40 days where it used to be fasting, like strict fasting, not just giving up soda or, trying to stay away from sugar, and every other religious has that in some way, whether it's Ramadan or dry fasting or liquid only fasting or detoxification or, those types of spiritual journeys. But then from a health perspective, there's a few main reasons why people embark on fasting. Number one is always going to be some sort of weight management. I mean, that's pretty obvious. But then if you think about it in terms of decreasing inflammation, reducing insulin resistance, boosting cognition and brain function, it has anti-aging and longevity properties. It can be used as cancer treatment on its own, or they're like at UCLA, they're doing great studies where they're using fasting alongside chemo to virtually eliminate all side effects. So fasting is something that
Wow.
we can use in so many different ways to facilitate healing. And that's how we need to think about it. And if I know it can seem very overwhelming to think of not eating, especially whenever we've been told you have to eat 5 times a day and keep adding food in constantly. I want everyone to think of that in terms of common sense. And we've talked about, this briefly, but think back to when, like, Laura, when we when I were in school, like when we were in like grade school and high school, we didn't have like 8 snacks and this and that. Like, I don't even remember being allowed to carry like water. We had a water fountain. We took
Right. Right.
long breaks from eating, and that was totally normal. And we look at how we've integrated more food into our lives, and we've also watched our health decline. So if all
Yeah,
these
especially
things
when
that
you have little kids, it's all about the snacks. It's all
I
about the
can't even
snacks.
fathom that. I can't.
Uh-huh.
But so
Yeah.
I ask that whenever we're talking about fasting, that everyone just takes a moment to think about things, whether it's fasting or any part of health, to go back to the basic common sense of before we were reading about health in the newspaper or watching about it on the news or seeing something on social media. What did humans do? What makes logical common sense? Does it make common sense health wise to eat when you're not hungry?
Hmm.
If your
Right,
body's
because
not saying, yeah,
that's the thing too, is, you hear and you read, and for many years, in the health industry, it was you need to be eating multiple times throughout the day to keep your metabolism going. Like, you need to eat every few hours. You shouldn't even be going, just from meal to meal. You should be eating in between to keep that metabolism revving, which was always kind of the mindset. So this is, yeah, like complete other side of the spectrum, but I think there's a lot of value here too, for
yeah,
sure.
and fasting isn't just about, you can do many different types of fasting, and it can
Mhm.
be extended fasts. So with my journey of fasting, so I started out, again, like when I was like doing IIN, we were making these transitions with juicing and juice fasting, and then that went into going from sweeter juices to extremely green, no
Mhm.
sugar juices, which then went into using bone broth as an addition to juice fasting, to eliminating the juicing, just going to really high quality bone broth, because if you haven't heard, bone broth is like everything. And
Mhm.
then I went from that to reading about water fasting and ways to heal the gut and ways to reverse aging, and how you can, basically reduce inflammation and feel so much better if at the only thing, thinking of it as the strictest form of an elimination diet. So we all know, if you
Mm.
maybe take gluten out for 6 months, maybe you'll feel better. If you take everything out, whenever you bring foods back in, it's a lot easier to see what makes a big impact on your health overall. So maybe you do a 24-hour fast, and to give you a not too visual explanation, but say you did a 12-hour fast or a 24-hour fast or a much longer fast, and you ate quinoa. Quinoa, I found out, is highly reactive for me. I don't eat a lot of grains or pseudo grains, but I had some quinoa, and I learned very quickly that quinoa and I are not friendly. I had
Mm.
joint pain. It went right through me. I learned at that point that by removing so many other things, who would have thought like quinoa, like in of itself, on its own, could be such a reactive food. So, that's all part of the process. But my
And
longest,
everybody's so different too. So it's really just kind of literally quieting all the noise in your body from all the different things you're putting in there. And then, being super aware of how your own body reacts. Cause again, different for everybody. So I love that you said this is like a supercharged elimination diet, because it is. It's so true.
Yes. And,
Yeah.
one of the things that I know people get really nervous about when you talk about fasting, of course, everyone's mind immediately goes to, I've done long fasts. I've done a 31 and a 38-day water only fast.
Wow.
I've had some, while that, during that, I've had some herbal teas and a little bit of black coffee, but really just those things and water and sparkling mineral water. And not, I mean, you should always do those under medical supervision and yada, 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 yada. I don't know where you find that medical supervision, but I survived. My husband survived. you know, Misconceptions are that you like lay around in bed and you're miserable. No, you go through a couple of bad days, but as long as you have fat stores, your body has energy. It has those
Mm.
fat's not benign. It's not just there to look unsightly. Those are stored calories. Those are stored forms of energy that our body is using as a protective mechanism in the case of a shortage of food. So whenever we
Mhm.
we allow our bodies to take a break from eating, it's like, oh wait, I already have like 4 hamburgers and french fries back here, and I'm just gonna grab those real quick and I'll use them. But the transitional period is what's hard, is getting through that, like, where your body's like, "But I just want, like, regular food. I don't wanna have to get that stuff I put away."
Yeah, and I'm
It's
sure this is different for everybody, but, like, how many days, are you in that period of, like, your body's confused? And I'm sure you feel hungry during that point, and it probably becomes a little bit of a mental thing and discipline to
yes.
kinda push through, right?
So for me, like, I'm very adapted, so I can jump into a fast and feel pretty good throughout. But when anybody begins to fast, it's always good to go slow. But if you say you were wanted to do an extended fast and you were just going to see how long you could go without
Mhm.
eating, the first 1 to 2 days, you're just getting over that mental hurdle of not putting food in your mouth. Okay, food
Mhm.
is really a huge part of our lives. For me, ugh, to take a month off of cooking is hard. That's my like
Yeah.
self-care. So that first 2 days, you're just getting over that situation, that addiction type situation. And then days 2 to 5 are when you're gonna feel your worst. Okay. And that's kind of dependent upon how addicted you are to things like caffeinated beverages and sugar and carbohydrates, how dependent you are on those types of foods. If you're already eating like a low carb or ketogenic diet, getting into fasting is a lot easier because your body's already used to kind of using stored energy. Whereas if you've been doing a lot of sugar or carbohydrate dieting, then you have to get your body to change over. So that's where you'll kind of go through that adjustment period where it's like a detoxification, where you're kind of coming off those addictions. You're going to get headachy, your stomach might hurt a little bit, and you're also adjusting to the way that your body is going to feel differently.
Mhm.
Because your belly makes noises, it doesn't mean you're hungry. It just means your belly's making noises. Your belly's just doing its thing. And I always like, ooh, my belly's so empty. It's rubbing on itself. I know I'm feeling good. Because then you know your belly's empty. You know that you're kind of working through some stuff. So that first 5 days, if you make it through the first 5 days, and I tell this to everyone, if someone reaches out and like I'm really struggling, listen, you just got to hunker down, drink lots of water, have some sea salt in your water to kind of keep your electrolytes going. And then after, if you need to, do a bone broth. But after day 5, something magical happens, and it's like smooth sailing. And as
Okay.
much as I can say that I've experienced it with myself, now my husband does commercial HVAC work, so he has a physically demanding job, and he fasts while he works.
Hmm.
So he can be out there working, and he's done 38 days of fasting and had no negative physical effects, other than that first couple of days of maybe cranky or headache.
Yeah,
Um,
which is like you said, it's like the stages of, like, addiction and withdrawal,
yep,
really.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're going to go through those ups and downs. Whenever we did every January we fast. So, and that depends, we normally start out looking to do a 7 or a 14 day. And the reason we do it every January is there's some research out there that a 7 to 14 day fast can reset your body of all toxic cancers. So just as
Mm.
a side note, that's why we've done that for the past, this was our 6th year that we do like water only for like 7 to 14 days.
And do
We
you only do it once a year? Like, how often do you do a fast?
Well, for us, there's a lot of factors that go into it. We only like commit ourselves during the month of January, and this is again where I'm going to say,
Uh-huh.
think about it in terms of the big picture without all of our couches and cars and houses. Where we live here in Pennsylvania, and where I am, we're both Eastern European descent. January is cold, and January is when food wouldn't be as plentiful. There's not as
Mm-hmm.
many things that are going to be as tempting when you're embracing foods that are fresh and seasonal. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that by honoring that naturally, like I know people are like, well, I'd rather fast in the summer. Not me. I don't want to fast in the summer. I might be picking raspberries. There might be mushrooms I'm foraging for. I'm working in the garden, not taking advantage of those fresh foods in nature's best doesn't make sense to me. But doing
Right.
it in January is that perfect timing. We read a lot and do a lot of like lazy Netflix and that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
that's when we commit. But then we'll do other cycles where we'll say, okay, like this week we're just kind of like taking it super slow and not eating a lot. Like we're trying to like get back on. I mean, come on, it's summer's right around the corner. We got to pull the rails in just a little bit before
Right.
summer. I mean,
Right.
we have a wedding this weekend. I got to make sure that my dress fits okay. You know.
Uh-huh.
So and with fasting, that's a tool that you have. So you always have that tool.
Yes. Yes. So, this is kind of, so far we've covered like longer stretches of fasting, but I know a big, I hate to use the word trend, because this is more than a trend. Like you said, it goes back. We're kind of going back to our roots, not really like a new trend. But
Exactly.
intermittent fasting is a hot topic right now. So how is that different from what you've talked about so far with like the water, the juice, or the bone broth
All right. So
fast?
this is super fun. Lori, what time did you eat yesterday? What was the last time you ate?
Probably about 7 o'clock.
Okay. What time did you eat this morning?
Right before we started this call. So I do think I might be a little bit of an intermittent faster, not even meaning to, because I'm a late breakfast eater.
And listen, unless you're getting up in the middle of the night and eating, we all fast. We
Yeah,
all
yeah.
fast intermittently throughout our entire lives. I mean, the first meal you have in the morning, you break your fast, aka breakfast.
Hmm.
It's not people think that these are such complicated themes. When I first started reading about fasting, and then there's a lot of variations to fasting. All I was like, we all kind of fell into that trap of like breakfast is the most important meal of the day, right?
Hmm.
You know where that came from?
Hmm.
It was a marketing slogan to sell grain-based cereals.
And
There
I always beat myself up, Haley, because I don't
I
love
don't want to
breakfast. Like
I
I'm
don't
not
want to
hungry
eat
first thing in the morning.
breakfast. Yeah, I normally get hungry around like 11 or 12. And once
Yeah.
I like read that, why eat if you're not hungry? Why are you forcing things in? And then like to me, if I'm not hungry, I would rather, let's say it this way, if I'm presented with needing to eat something when I'm not hungry, I'm going to reach for something that's not the best choice versus forcing in something for health reasons that I didn't want to eat. Like, for
Hmm.
example, I mean, it would be a lot more fun for me to grab like a donut, not that I would, but to grab a donut than to eat a hard boiled egg,
Hmm.
because I'm not hungry. So I'm just kind of like looking for something to like pop in my mouth. And that's why I think a lot of people eat these convenience foods. Now, that being said, so intermittent fasting is just fasting in varying or different time frames. So you can do it in any time. I mean, I think every human being should intermittent fast for 12 hours overnight.
Hmm.
We wouldn't. I mean, man, before we had houses and electricity, wouldn't eat all through the night and get up in the morning and have a donut. Things were a little more spaced out in what we did. And that, just having that consciousness right there, just do 12 hours. That's an intermittent fast.
And that
Making
can look
sure.
different for everyone too, because maybe if you are a person that's really hungry when you first wake up in the morning, maybe that just means you stop eating earlier in the
e-
evening,
Exactly. And
right?
that's why I always say that, from that approach, just everyone be mindful of a 12-hour window. 12
Mm-hmm.
hours of feeding, 12 hours of not feeding. And then use your body as your guide. So, you'll hear people talk about 16 eights and 18 sixes and 24 ones and whatever. And what that refers to is your fasting window versus your eating window. So, like I said, if you look at 12 and 12, like 12 hours of fasting and then 12 hours of eating, and then you can gradually push that fasting window open further to 13, 14, 15, 16 hours. And for most people, it becomes a little easier in the mornings where you're like, when you give yourself that freedom to not force food into your body, to say, well, I'm really not hungry yet. So I'll
Mm-hmm.
just wait a little longer. And you can get into your natural groove. Like my husband doesn't eat during the day. He doesn't eat breakfast. He has unsweetened iced tea in a cup in the morning instead of coffee. And then he drinks like a whole bunch of water during the day. And he doesn't eat until he gets home from work. Now he does get home from work at 3:30 and we do go to bed at 8. And that's typically his grazing window. But that works for him. Like he's found that he doesn't need to eat during the day. He's more productive. He doesn't have an afternoon slump. He works through his lunch so he gets to come home earlier, which means he lives more of his life at home and less at work. It's finding that rhythm. For me, I get up at like 6 a.m. with him. And then by the time it comes to 11 or 12, I need a bite. So I have a bite to eat. And then we eat dinner around 4. And then that's really it. But it's about finding what your body naturally will want to be in a routine. But also forcing your body a little bit is fun too. Like seeing how far you could push it. So like for you, Lori, like just taking it an extra hour, like saying, well, I'm kind of hungry right now. Maybe wait an extra hour and see how you feel. See if
Yeah.
that works for you. Being
And I
mindful
love
of
that
when you eat at night.
yes. Yes. And I love that you mentioned your husband's schedule because I think that's, a big deal for a lot of people who are working all day, right? So
It's
that,
very easy for
like,
someone like me who's at home making my own schedule. I can sit down when I want. I can take a break if I need to. I can eat whenever I want. I'm not on anyone's schedule but my own. So I can talk the talk, but I need to have people understand my husband does this and he works a physically demanding job away from the house,
yeah,
and has
yeah,
no issue. And a lot of the power that he has where he works is that he's brought other people into that same lifestyle with him, where they started to see how Ray felt great all day and he wasn't taking lunch breaks and he wasn't slumping in the afternoon and feeling miserable. He was just go, go, go. And everyone else is still working. And he's like, well, I don't take a lunch. I work through lunch, like not snack on the go. I just work through lunch and I go home.
yeah, which is interesting because I think a lot of people, the misconception with intermittent fasting is that, you're eating like later on in the day till earlier in the evening. And that doesn't work for a lot of people because they're at work all day. And that's when they're
Mm-hmm.
not eating because they're busy. And then they come home from work and they eat, right? So
Well,
they're like,
we've
I
all
could
had those.
never.
I mean, think about those days. Yeah, I always like think about those days at work. I still work, but I mean, there were days where I was busy from the time I walked into the office until 7 o'clock, and realized I didn't eat lunch. I didn't go to the bathroom. I was busy, 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 and I wasn't hungry. I was busy. I was occupied. I didn't need to refuel. So we've all been there. We've had times where we forgot to eat.
Yeah,
It's
and it's actually
it's
an
okay.
option for people to do intermittent fasting. Um, and they're just not eating through the day while they're working, and then they say they get home at 7 o'clock and they eat. That's okay because their window of not eating is during the day when they're working, and it's actually one less thing you need to think about during the day. Is
Yes.
planning your meals and taking
And that
food with you. So it kind of
that
makes it
really comes
easier.
back to a lot of the things about fasting that have been so appealing, like for us and for me. I mean, I used to pack my husband a lunch. I mean, and he's an eater. I mean, snacks and this and that. And then he calls and he ate his whole lunch by 10. And I'm like, buddy, you could be at work for a couple more hours. I mean,
Right, right.
you made me a sandwich. I ate it on my way to work because it was just so nice. I was like, oh, come on. But food is like powerful. Think about it. If you have something really good for lunch, all you're gonna do is think about like what you're gonna eat for lunch. I mean, it's
Yeah,
exciting.
and that's like the addiction thing. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
It's interesting.
It's and the nice thing about fasting is anyone can fast. It doesn't matter what dietary way of eating you subscribe to or don't subscribe to. you're eating the same foods. You're not having to like calorie restrict because there's these magical things that we're finding that happen when we're eating in a smaller window. So if you eat all day long, your body, let me explain this to you from a like little blood sugar explanation, because I know you have
Yes.
some other questions about that. So regardless of how you eat, when we eat, our our body has this entire process it goes through that no matter what food it is, we do have some little bit of pancreatic activity, insulin response, blood glucose action, okay? And we all kind of know at this point that keeping our blood glucose, or AKA blood sugar, under control is really coming out to be one of the keys to sustained longevity and better human health. It's a precursor to a lot of things, not just diabetes. So when you're eating food constantly, your body is constantly producing glucose, especially unless you're eating like keto, which would keep it lower. Most people have an insulin response to everything they're eating throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that like every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So you eat a donut in the morning, your blood sugar spikes up, and then whenever it spikes up, it shoots back down. And then you have your snack, 2 hours later, okay? An apple, we'll say an apple, it's still sugar. Blood sugar goes
Mm-hmm.
up, blood sugar goes down. Then 2 hours later, you eat again, up and down, up and down. We're doing this throughout the day. Whenever you're
Right.
letting your body take a break and you're only eating in that condensed window, your body's not feeling that insulin spike and drop that eventually can lead to insulin resistance. So if you have
Mm-hmm.
insulin resistance, or if you start fasting as a preventative measure, it helps to level that playing field for you. And if you think about like the A1C that we're supposed to be mindful of, that's taking the average. Well, if you're not having as many spikes and dips, then your average is going to start to lower down because we're removing that like high number.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way that I always, and there's a lot of other complicated things that we could talk about, like mTOR and anti-aging and human HGH and these kinds of things that you also see whenever we're constantly taking in food that are suppressed or exaggerated. So the blood sugar is just the one that people can most easily understand, especially if you know anyone who is a diabetic, and understanding how they check their blood sugar and then have reactionary, things that happen. So whenever we take that out of the equation, your body doesn't react quite the same. So let's say you were eating like baseline 2,000 calories a day, okay? For some reason, if you spread that 2,000 calories out during an entire day versus eating it in a 4-hour window, your body is going to handle that energy calorie that you take in differently.
Yeah, because I like how you just explained the spikes and dips. Like you're not gonna have that as
Yes. So
much.
whenever you're
Yeah.
taking things in and then your body's putting it away, then it's never
Mm-hmm.
reaccessing that stuff that it's storing. And it's not just from a fat perspective, that's from a toxin perspective, that's from like just extra junk. And when our bodies are constantly digesting food, okay, let's think about it. Digestion takes up the largest percentage of energy that we do all day long. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Say you wake up at 6 a.m. and you eat from 6 a.m., and I'm not joking, till midnight, because a lot of people live in that world, right? The go, go, go
Mm-hmm.
mentality, continually eating all day long. So if your body's digesting food all day long, when does it fight? When does it repair?
Mm-hmm.
When does it do its necessary maintenance? It's like you're at work from 6 a.m. to midnight. You come home and you just take that little 6 hour window that you need to sleep in. When are you going to clean your house and do your laundry? No one's
Right.
taking out the trash. So by incorporating in these longer fasting periods, we're giving our body the necessary and required time that it needs to take out the trash, to fight things
Mm-hmm.
off. I mean, it's when you
I
really
love
think
that.
about, I mean, does it, I said, we're going to talk about common sense things, but it really makes sense. And it's kind of back to, you know, someone had said on Facebook that their dog was sick and I'm going to have to force it to eat. We need to stop this idea of forcing our bodies to eat when it's not hungry. If
Mm-hmm.
your body is sick, whether it's your dog, your kid, yourself, and they have fat reserves that they can pull upon, We don't need to force anyone to eat. The body's signaling us, hey, I need to use my energy to fight this. My
Hmm.
energy needs to be used here. I don't need the chaos of taking in food. I mean, think about it. Then you're sick, and then you're having popsicles and ginger ale and high fructose corn syrup and saltine crackers. We're just trying to pummel food in to get those calories in. And our body's like, I don't even want this. I don't
Yeah,
need
it's like
this.
a huge,
I'm
huge distraction,
busy.
huh? Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
if you really start to think about it as a machine or energy in terms of, how much there's only so much your body can do with what we give it. And we need to prioritize letting it run through the things it needs to do. And that's why, when I'd said before that we do some fasting to keep cancer at bay or to kind of get a preventative measure. Listen, none of this stuff is proven. The best research that we hear isn't proven. Okay, we need to just understand that our best tools are just using our common sense and using our body to figure out what does best for it. You know, there's nothing that it hurts, but if there's a
Hmm.
chance that taking a break from eating for 7 to 14 days every January could prevent me from getting cancer, count me in. It's the smallest thing I can do in comparison to the big picture. So I'm missing a couple of
Hmm.
meals in a year. Huh. I'd much rather miss a couple meals than get cancer, is the way that we think of things. But if you're never giving your body that opportunity to do its house cleaning, when do we expect it to happen?
Right, right. Such great perspective, Haley. Really. I love this. So good. It's such a different way of looking at things.
Basics.
Definitely.
Well,
Basics.
we're
Yeah.
constantly inundated with, I mean, if you watch the news, you hear research says this, a study says that, eat 17 times a day, exercise for 14 hours. I mean, don't eat fat, don't do this, don't do that. We don't know what the studies are, how these studies were actually done. We don't know if they're epidemiology, if they're double blind studies. We don't know who's paying for them. We don't know what the agenda is. We don't know who interpreted the data. We don't know how many times, the telephone game, you know, when a study gets released and they have a headline, then this media outlet picks it up and has a headline. Those headlines are like the telephone game. So they could
Hmm.
say like, what the example that I heard was like back whenever smoking was like, we just figured out smoking was bad. I mean, surprise, surprise. And it was like smoking filtered cigarettes was better than non-filtered, which yes, okay, I guess they are. But it ended up that the media translated that to smoking filtered cigarettes is good for your health. So if you think about the telephone game, right? We're all sitting in a circle and we start that rumor and see how it comes back. That's how a lot of these sensationalized headlines come out too. So we're constantly bombarded with all this overwhelming health information when it just comes back to, does this make logical sense? And how, if we didn't have someone telling us to live, how would we live?
Hmm.
What would make sense?
Yeah, and you hit a big one on the head too with agendas. It is so hard to know who to trust now. So again, this is why we need to be our own advocates and trust ourselves and do what feels right and listen to your body. Huge thing.
Yes.
Um, but I want to move into, a little bit about hormones. I
Hmm.
know you and I talked about at the beginning, about keeping this very surface level and basic,
Hmm.
because I really think that's the message people need to hear. You know me, I'm all about simplicity, and I'm pretty basic, I got to say. And I like it that way because I think that's the message a lot of people need, because there is this, overabundance of information. But I do think it's important to just kind of talk a little bit about how this is affecting hormones. And, women, we're pretty complex. Our bodies sometimes are, harder to try new things than men, just because of our complex hormones. So,
Hmm.
you as a woman who has done this and, knowing all from all your education and research, could you just kind of walk us through a little bit how fasting impacts your hormones?
So, like specifically, I'm going to touch on cortisol really quick because I know
Yeah.
that a lot of people have concerns about like adrenal fatigue and cortisol dysregulation and how fasting affects it. And there's all kinds of the quote unquote rumors that women shouldn't fast, or it's going to mess up this hormone, it's going to
Mhm.
deregulate that hormone, and then it's going to cause all these things. Nothing works for everyone. At this time, And to be abundantly honest, there probably will never be the level and precision in studies that people want to see for empirical answers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It doesn't matter what there's, one man's food is another man's poison. We need to be
Right.
mindful of that. And for me personally, when I first started water fasting, it was whenever I came out of writing my books, my two cookbooks. Writing cookbooks is like the best and the worst. So when I signed a contract for my cookbook, I read it and then I read it again and said, oh, I have 109 days to write 100 recipes with photography and front matter. Oh, that's going to be nice. That's fun. Um, I wrecked my body, like wrecked my body.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
amount of like work and time and effort and stress and anxiety. And my husband's like, but you were like fine. Like I didn't even see you like sweat it. You like worked 2 nights all night at the very end. But other than that, you were normal. I wrecked everything. And the way I knew I wrecked things was I had testing done. So we really don't know our hormone status in any respect unless we actually have functional testing done. So we can
Mm-hmm.
say that we have hormone problems, but unless we have the tests, we don't know. We just know we feel bad. So I don't like to think of things in terms of how it affects each individual thing as a public statement, but I will use my own data. So people say if you have adrenal fatigue, you should not fast. I started fasting following my second cookbook. I did 12-hour adrenal cortisol collects and understood exactly from that saliva collect what was going on and how extremely dysregulated I was and how I was suffering. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I read the things that says I shouldn't do it, but my gut said I needed to, so I did it. And I went back for tests and everything's fine. I felt better after I think it was like day 9 for me during that very first extended fast. And that was a 31-day fast. Everything cleared up for me and my energy returned and I never felt better in my entire life. I was like ready to like conquer the world.
Yeah, and I
So
wanted to
for
talk a
me,
little bit about that too, because we talked about like how you're feeling when you are going through the process of fasting. But I think it's so interesting and people need to hear how you feel when you come out of fasting, because that's what we all want. That's the magic we're all looking for, right?
yes,
So
and
that doesn't just
and
happen without some effort, you
no,
know?
and a lot of times I think that people get really scared. I mean, it's a scary thing to get away from food, and I know that firsthand because I get a lot of really angry things commented to me and emailed to me about how I'm like causing women to have eating disorders. I'm like, whoa, I'm not doing that. That
Yeah,
comes from
yeah,
someplace different. That's not because I'm telling you to get healthy. But the thing with fasting is you can stop at any time. If it doesn't
right.
feel right, then you stop. And it doesn't mean that it's a failure. It means that that you need to revisit. So fasting doesn't have to be a 31-day continuous thing. It doesn't have to be a 24-hour continuous thing. That's why intermittent fasting works. But if you find that you don't feel good after you've given it a long enough period, then you transition away from it, but always mindful that you have to give your body a break. For like I took this little like independent poll, and I've always been, I guess you would say, lucky that my monthly cycle has been extremely predictable. I haven't been on hormonal birth control in 15 years or something. Um, that my cycle has been always very, very predictable. I don't have a lot of symptoms, but for some reason, when I fast, I will start my period early. And I can't find any medical literature documenting why this would happen, but I've spoke to a couple other women that said that they have the same thing happen to them. Not coming like 3 weeks early, but maybe coming like 4 or 5 days early. So I can't figure out that whole mechanism, but I know it must have something to do with the detoxification process, or maybe speeding things along, or whatever that could be. But there are women that will tell you at this point we have to listen to other people's experience. You will hear people that say fasting is the worst thing, and then me, fasting is the best thing. The only way
Mhm.
you're going to know what works for your body and how you feel is for you to do that experiment. You have all of the power. If someone
Mhm.
says that gluten is a superfood, right? And we should all eat gluten, but if you eat gluten, you're going to sit in the bathroom for 3 hours, then you know not to listen to that information. And the only way you know that is to take gluten out and try and see how you feel. We have these very, very easy tools at our hands at our disposal constantly. We're fearful to do it because we're looking for that easy, this is how it works for everyone. And there is not an answer. And, back to fasting with the hormones, we're not going to see the studies done on it because there's no one that's going to make money on it.
Yeah.
Every
Back to
study
the
that's done,
agendas. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's not a negative on fasting, but telling people not to eat doesn't profit any group. So no group is going to invest $50 million in a 20-year fasting study if there's nothing to be gained from it.
Yeah.
Pharmaceutical drugs, their studies are done because the pharmaceutical company that will benefit from that drug pays for it, or that supplement. I mean, it's far reaching in that effect. So we're kind of like in these awkward positions where people want this empirical data saying that this is good or this is bad. I don't want anyone to be afraid to try something safe. What if it changes your entire life? And all
Yes.
you had to do was miss breakfast.
Right. Right.
It's
Wow.
it's a very easy thing to play with. Just listening to your body, just taking a break. But if you start to do something and you really feel bad, like we had mentioned this before the podcast. So just to go through like my take on fasting and what my husband and I experienced is day 1 and 2, you're just coming off that like little thing where you want to eat. Like you're getting over that mental hurdle of not eating. Then days 2 to 5 are kind of when you feel the worst. You're going to come off of addictions. You're going to come off of, that blood sugar spike, what you're depending on having gummy bears or whatever in the afternoon. You're going to come off your soda. You're going to come off all these other things. Even if you're eating a clean diet, you're still getting off the roller coaster. So day 2 to 5, you're going to feel pretty bad. I mean, and generally the worse you feel, the more you need to be in that situation.
Right.
Day 5, it starts to get to smooth sailing. By day 10, when we were doing our last fast in January, Ray and I wanted to do 14 days. That was our goal. And it was like day 10, Ray's like, I'm not ending at day 14. And I'm like, game, let's do it. How long do you want to go? I'm game. Yeah. I can
Yeah,
do
because you've
this.
already gotten over
Yeah.
the hard part. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll do that. So we ended up going 38 days. And I let
Yeah.
him guide us as to how far he wanted to push it and how good he felt. We
Yeah.
listened to our bodies. And if at any point we started, especially because he has a physical job, I'm always like, listen to your body. Here's some salt because salt helps you with your hydration levels and, helps with some electrolytes. Take some salt, or we have instant bone broth, the bone broth powder that he can use if he really needs a little boost of something as a precaution. And he knows if he felt super weak, eat some like meat from somewhere. But, giving your body that time. And with fasting, it doesn't have to be an absolute. So if you're just doing intermittent fasting and just starting with that 12-hour window and then just pushing it forward, if you're feeling fine, then continue. If you're not, then stop. I mean, it's common sense.
Right. And I'd love to
my mom
circle back how you
yeah, go ahead.
said, like, you have the power. You
Yeah.
have the power.
Yes.
And we just all kind of need to step into that power and listen to our bodies and try something new. Yeah.
Yes.
I know I'm like motivated now after hearing all this. I really didn't know a lot about it starting our conversation today. Other than, some things that I've read and some things I've heard people say and a lot of questions I've got about it. But, the facilitating healing thing really resonates with me because that is true. This constant digestion of food is a huge distraction for your body. So to me, that's a huge motivation right there.
We're so quick to say, oh my gosh, I think fasting may not be safe. But where were we to say, but wait, why would I eat more frequently if I'm not hungry?
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Mm-hmm.
the doctor gives you a cream and you put it on and you don't question it, but someone tells you to use lavender oil, and it's like, I have to research this for 18 days, right? It's the
Yep.
ruination of society. And what if it doesn't work? Well, 95% of the stuff you try in the world isn't going to work anyway. So let's just take that off the table because it's not going to hurt you to try. And you can
Right.
always stop.
Right.
There's no
Right.
long-term negatives to fasting. It's only potentially positive.
Yes. That's a great message. I think that's exactly what people need to know. It's not going to hurt you.
Yeah.
You stop at any time if you need to. Yeah. Well, thank you, Hayley. This was great. I, again, learned so much. I'm excited. I'm excited to try this out.
Oh, there
And
is one thing that we probably do need to mention is who should not fast, right?
yes, that was
So
kind of on our list of things to discuss.
yeah. All right. So you should not fast if you are obviously very sick, don't have a fat, we'll say, don't have a healthy body fat percentage. If you're nursing, if you are under a doctor's care for a medically controlled disease. So again, common sense. If you're super skinny and you need to eat, then you need to eat. But still be mindful that you can still fast overnight. You can still be conscientious of that break period.
And like you said, so much of it comes down to common sense. So
Yeah, if it hurts, if you hit your finger with a hammer and it hurts, then don't hit your finger with a hammer. I mean, I always say to people, you can always tell how healthy someone is by saying, like, how do you feel? And letting them,
Yes.
even if it's not to you, let them answer it to themselves. How do you feel?
Yes.
They may not be able to tell you how bad they feel, but we all know if we're not healthy. We all know if we don't have energy. We all know if we need to make a change. If eating all day long isn't serving you or doesn't make sense, then try something different.
Yep. Try something different. See how you feel. That's like the biggest indicator of health. It's how you feel. All right. Well, is there anything else that you want to share with us today?
Nothing that I can think of. I mean, if you have any questions, I'm always here.
Yes, and in the show notes, I will put some links to your information and where to find you. Again, her blog is Health Starts in the Kitchen, which is also your Instagram handle, right? So
yes,
I highly recommend checking it out because not only is there beautiful, beautiful photography, but there's like great information behind all of that photography too, which is so insightful. So thank you, Hayley, for all you do and for taking time out of your day today to talk us through this. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Anytime.
That's it for today. For more from Kim, you can go to kimmaravich.com. For more from Lori, go to simplyempoweredllc.com. We're always open to listener questions or suggestions for the show. You can email those to contact@awholenewyou.podcast.com. We'd also love it if you joined our Facebook community and followed us on Instagram. Just search for A Whole New You Podcast. And lastly, if you'd be so kind as to leave us a rating and review in iTunes, we would really appreciate that so more people can find our show and join our community. We'll see you next week.